Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, paying our respect to the elders of past, present, and emerging. But thank you, everyone, for joining us for this month's of AI Talk. As you know, this is a monthly series designed to help people talk about AI. You don't have to be a professional, PhD, or an expert in the field. Even if you're curious about how it impacts you and what are the implications from ethics to how you use it, this is a place to come and talk about it, discuss it, and learn from each other. The intent of the talk is to encourage participation, so please don't worry too much about taking notes. We're going to record these sessions and then have it published on the AI Talks websites. This way you will all be able to review and engage fully in the sessions. Today we're actually very excited to have Zul Al-Kabir as the speaker. Zul is the CTO at Exemplar Systems, and he has been a problem solver both by nature and action. He's looking at ways to improve collaboration among students, apprentices, educators, and organizations. And before Exemplar Systems, Zul was the program director overseeing the federal government's large-scale projects around MyGov and Identity Program Management Office. He contributed to the government's key digital agenda initiatives. Zul has worked in multiple roles as directors and senior technology roles, and helped various federal government agencies over the decades. He obtained his MPhil in information science, specializing in artificial intelligence, and he also holds a master's and bachelor's in information technology from University of Canberra. In today's talk, Zul will be sharing how Exemplar Systems is using data science to address Australia's skills shortages. In 2021 to 2022, nearly 90,000 individuals completed apprenticeships or traineeships in Australia. This is great, but 43% of participants never finished their programs. This issue is critical as Australia faces significant skills shortages, particularly in trade and professional sectors. So improving completion rates is essential to the nation's economic prosperity. Exemplar System has developed an AI model that helps identify students at risk of discontinuing their training. This model enables training organizations to engage with students proactively and offer the necessary support to enhance the chances of completing their course. Zul, we're very excited to hear what you have to share. It's over to you.
Thank you very much, Avi, and thanks, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in. So today, my presentation will showcase how AI can give us the power to solve complex problems within the domain, like the education sector that we work in. And the problems that I'm referring to, they are very challenging and were deemed to be unachievable in the past. So in this presentation, which I'm trying to move on to the next slide, I will tell you a bit about the domain where Exemplar Systems have become a leader because of providing a range of tremendous value-added services and offerings. I will be highlighting a range of key challenges within education sector that keeps us awake at night, but equally it gives us the ground and pathway for an innovation and invention. With those challenges, particularly we are trying to focus on one key challenge that is multifaceted, and we identified that AI would be a great tool for us to actually just have a foundation for a bigger solution. And then, of course, talking about AI, I will show you the model that we developed and the architecture of it, and the result of how it's functioning. What do we do? Exemplar Systems, our business model is centered around providing learning and assurance services to the vocational education sector. So registered training organizations, or RTOs, employers, supervisors, and apprentices, they use our services for a range of reasons. In this slide, you can see two diagrams. On the left, we have listed our core services, and on the right-hand side, we have the equivalent products that provide those services. So as I mentioned, like if you're a student or apprentice, students and apprentices, they will subscribe to Exemplar LMS, which is the learning management platform, to actually access learning material that are relevant for their qualification. They use the LMS to actually sit for their summative and formative assessments as well. When it comes to tracking their performance and academic results, Lighthouse is the product that we offer. The students or the admin or the organizations, they use to access and track the student performance, academic performance. You might be aware that in trade sector, especially in training space, if you're an apprentice, a lot of your experience and training goes as part of your on-the-job placement, and that's what we are calling workplace evidence. So we have a system called Exemplar Profiling. It is our value proposition product. Only like one or two other competitors, they provide these services, and we are at the top of the tier. We offer very unique services where the tradies, or if you're an apprentice working on a site, you actually can record your activities on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So within the system, we have something called profiling card, or a card that you go in and then provide the number of hours, the number of activities or areas that you have worked in. So every apprentice, as part of their training, as part of their qualification, they use this system. And this is an important one. I will come back to it later on and give you a bit more insight about how we use these cards. And just wanted to give you a view of the entire education sector. That is the domain that we operate in. As you can see, like more than 4.6 million students actually undergo a vocational education and training, and 1.3 million students undergo university degree here in Australia. For us as Exemplar Systems, we primarily focus on the vet sector, but in future our services are being improved, which will mean that it will be potentially relevant for university students as well. Our services will come into scope for them as well. Looking at that diagram, I think some people may come up with the question, if 4.6 million students are studying, are doing some sort of training, why do we hear about skill shortages in the newspaper? Now and then it talks about skill shortage, trade shortage. And the partial answer of that question we can find into these challenges that it's pervasive within the education sector. Some of the common challenges, it's been existing for decades, and in recent years we have also come across the issue of the case where we have seen significant decline in student engagement. And more than 71% students, they suffer from various types of well-being issues. It could be mental or physical. You have abusive environment. You have suicide cases in many occasions. There are students who are finishing their school, and many students, they look for information to decide whether they want to go to uni or vet or TAFE. We don't have, at the moment, we don't have useful, like you have useful information, but you don't have targeted information that will help them to decide where they want to go, whether they want to go to uni or whether they want to go to vet. And then this one is an important one, is the relationship between an apprentice and employer. So as you know, as part of any training or trade training, you have to have an employer. And in many cases, the relationship between this employer and the apprentice is not that great. There is a study that was done. It showed that more than 43% of these apprentices, they drop out because of these employment related issues. We have general educational technology issues where teachers, a bit of it is due to AI as well, so they struggle to develop authentic assignments. Many teachers, they struggle to monitor the progress of students. 65% of educators, they think that there has to be a better way of engaging with students or providing better learning materials or a method that they can use to provide better learning materials. And the biggest challenges of all is this one, is that is the topic of the day, is the non-completion rates. As you can see, the VET, it is estimated that 43% of the students who enrolled in 2017 did not complete their qualification by the end of 2021. So you're looking at almost half of them are dropping out. University, there is a lot of dropout, but the number is a lot smaller than what you see in VET sector, which is 25%. Now, in these, within this, looking at this kind of information, this also gives us partial answer to the question that I posed earlier. What has happened is that at the national level, there is no personalized or consolidated study or consolidated information about students at the national level about why they actually drop out. So we have pockets of studies and surveys that have been done over the years that actually indicates a bunch of the challenges that I mentioned. And one of the key challenge was the relationship between the employer and the apprentice, the quality of training, the well-being. So those are the three real problems that they face. And the dropout happens at the earlier stages of their training as well. So more than 41% students, they drop out on the first year or second year of their study. So that's quite significant. And the reason that they have provided was either they did not find the employer compatible. The other reason is whatever work experience that they had expected in the job ad is not what they're experiencing when they started the apprenticeship. So a lot of students are complaining about that as well. And then, of course, I have mentioned about the well-being issue. So when we undertook our feasibility study in this space to better understand, and I'm telling you, this is a problem that has been within the industry for many, many decades, right? In Exemplar, we tried to look at all these numbers and pockets of studies that have been carried out to understand the thing that we can do. So one thing that we have found in Exemplar System, as I have mentioned, we offer services for LMS, track their academic progress, track their on-the-job experiences. We found that we store a lot of information about our student. And the term that we are using is that their activities and the movements. So, the card that gets completed is on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis that they fill out for trade training and other sorts of training. So that gives us a lot of data that we can harvest and try to understand. And I will. This is the profiling card that I mentioned earlier in my slide. This is just the desktop version. We also have an app version that allows an apprentice on the site, if they're in a construction site, they can use the app to access, and on a weekly basis they can say this is the day, their start date, end date for about a week, and the kind of activities. So if he is an electrician, he can say, I have the work area that I've worked on was installing LV appliances. The duration could be 25 minutes, and the total hours are also recorded, which is a total of within that week, 40 hours. The kind of support that they needed could be assisted by their supervisor, or they had done it independently. And the activities could be, I have taken some measurements and the tools that they use. So we store a whole range of information. And the reason we store this information, it's another context, is that this gets into a system, then we have got our software algorithm that is used to calculate points out of it. So depending on what activities you have carried out, the system, so there is a national standard about how you calculate points. So it gets translated into a point and then gets translated into your performance. So for the training, it gets reflected in your academic, in your overall performance for that training. So there are lots of maths that go behind to translate this into your point, and it actually tells you how far a student has progressed in their training. And also we store a lot of meta information, which is like when the student have started their training, how many cards they have submitted. So as I mentioned, if they have to submit one card a week, it's like in 52 weeks they need to complete 52 cards. If they have only done 30 cards and not they're missing 20 cards, we said missing cards. So if they miss 20 cards, it is an indication that there is something happening. So either the relationship between the supervisor and the employer is breaking down, or he's simply on vacation. That could be one outcome, but there could be many other underlying reasons. And while we did the study, we sat with our training organizations, we call them RTOs, and try to understand. So they have given us several rounds of feedback about what indicates a kind of discontinuation in their study by looking at those activities and movements. So these data will actually, this amount of data actually allow us to predict, and that's what the RTO and the employers, they use. We have our Exemplar system. They can look at student information about their cards and about the movements, and manually they can now say which student needs like a bit more attention. So they can actually, this is purely manual at this point in time, and that's what they do. So what when we did our study, we looked at it and we said, yes, it is looking at these data points, we can actually predict whether we need to do an early intervention with the student or not, whether we can do a follow-up with the student or not. And because it is manual and the organizations are doing it manually at the moment, AI would be best fit as the tool to actually make those kind of predictions by looking at the data and the pattern out of it. So that was our first hypothesis, to say, we can build a model that can predict whether a follow-up with a student is required or not. So we have broken down the bigger problem into smaller chunks, and that's what we targeted as part of our of building the model. So again, I'm just showing you a glimpse of all the data. I think what we did next is harvesting the data, because we have database, hundreds and thousands of information in there. We targeted those data points, particularly 13 data points. So we used our APIs and a custom code to actually extract the data that we need. So that went as part of the pre-processing of the data. So we collected all those data, only target data. We collected those, we did a lot of pre-processing, and then of course we used iStudio and our programming language to clean the data as well, to make sure that it then is prepared for our AI model. So in parallel, while we worked on the data analytics side of it and building the data that is digestible by the AI model, we started looking into the platform for AI. So basically, Exemplar System, the entire platform, those 3 products that I mentioned earlier, they are all hosted on AI. They're already on cloud, and AWS already offers really powerful machine learning build and deployment tools like SageMaker. So we decided to use SageMaker, TensorFlow, and Python as the foundational tool for AI where we authored our code and built and deployed our services, the machine learning services. They're all hosted on AWS. And then as a second tier backend, we used Java. And at the front end for the users, that's the most important part. That's what the users care about. That's what the rest of the world cares about. We use TypeScript, which is a very, very reactive kind of programming language, and Angular to give a very dynamic UI. We wanted to ship something. We wanted to ship a product that would be really suitable for those admins and those super users so that they can find it useful. So we looked at the user end as well. And we looked at the technology stack and tried to make sure that when the demand goes up or down, we can scale up, we can spin up new servers, we can spin them down. So those kind of dynamic kind of environment or orchestration of those servers, we tried to use that within AWS as well. So that's technology stack. And this is a very high level view of our architecture. So the neural net that we used for our AI model, of course, it has 3 layers. We have the input layer, we have one hidden layer, and then we have one output layer. So in the input layer, as I have mentioned, we have 13 neurons, they're marked in blue, as you can see, and I have used ... to indicate that there are more. And then in the hidden layer, the middle one that marked in purple, we have 10 neurons that gets fired. And then in the output layer, we have used 2 neurons. So in the input layer, so we have used ReLU as the activation function between all the between the layers because it is very effective. And softmax, we have used softmax for the output layer for the predictive probabilities. So transfer the output results into probabilities. So that's softmax. And cross entropy, we use that as the loss function because it works really well with softmax. So cross entropy method was used for backpropagation and error reduction. As I mentioned, we had the data set, we had gone through the pre-processing and cleansing of those data, 13 data points. We prepared 20,000 training data sets and 20,000 test data sets. And 20,000 training data set was not something that we got manually entered. We wrote, if then else kind of program to automate some of those records. So we went back to the RTOs, got some feedback from them, got sample data, and from there we tried to develop those training data. But majority of them are really real life production values. It's just the recommendation end. So for the labeling purposes at the end, whether it is yes or no, the training data needed those labels. So we used some Java programming to actually automate that process as well.
And just to clarify, the label here is this person needs intervention versus
That's
not.
correct, yes. So it's a yes and no.
How did you come up with the conditions to say this student needs intervention versus this student doesn't? Is it the RTO or the instructors are providing that input, or how?
So the RTOs have given us sample data, so we extracted those data points from database and then went back and sat with our RTOs, the admins. They know the best about what data indicates whether an intervention is required or not. So we went through that consultation process to
and then use that to construct the rules.
Exactly,
you're
right. Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
That's essentially what you've taken as a sample from them.
Sample.
And then expanded the sample labels.
That's correct. So we had few thousands of those rows for which we went back to the RTO to give us the labeling, and then we just scaled it up using some if-then logic.
Fantastic.
To say, now this data, in this case, the RTO admin has said this is yes. If I find similar kind of data set, why don't I say yes as well? So we expanded that, scaled it, and that gave us a large number of labeled records. which was very painful, and painful for, I think it is a favor that the organizations, the RTOs have done. And Ben always told me, you need to be careful about how you, make those requests. But I think we survived, and they have been wonderful. I have to say, they could see the benefits. So they have been saying it is challenging. They have been saying, there is no national kind of data that can help us doing this, because they're spending so much of their time in finding out. They're saying, if 50% of the students are dropping out, I'm spending a lot of time to find that out. If there was a better way of doing it, we could actually make sure that these students, a large portion, or maybe 1% of those students, if you could make sure that they finish, that's a big thing. So they're very passionate about the work that they do. So once we ran those tests and training and test data sets, the result was gradually it improved. So we saw at this point in time, it's sitting at 96.58%. So like if I have 10 students, it is able to most of the time to say like 9 of them are accurate. It's giving that kind of recommendation. And we cross-validated that with the organization as well to say, what do you think? And they think it's looking good. There are spaces for improvement, but yes, as initial, it's looking good. Talking about the user interface, Exemplar Systems has lots of different user interfaces for those super users, the admins, the employers, where they can go, they can track students, they can track their cards, how many approved, how many pending. But we created a new interface for this particular AI model. So if I am an RTO admin, I can go in, log in. I can, if I am from Queensland TEFE, and I'm the RTO admin of Queensland TEFE, I will log in, I'll select the qualification, and under that qualification, you might have 500 students. We have many more students depending on which course you are enrolled at. So what this will do, will go when you hit search, at the back end, it will identify those 500 students, and then for each student, it will run that AI predictive model to say, I have this data for these students, his missing cards, his submitted cards, and looking at that, the pattern that I see is that we need to do a follow-up. And the result actually looks like this. So once you search, you'll get to see a list of students, and then each row is a reflection of that student, and then some valuable key information for the RTO admin to cross-validate and say, yes, the recommendation is accurate. And at the last column, you can see recommend follow-up. This is the yes, no is generated by AI. So AI is able to say whether they need to do a follow-up or not.
So how far in advance can the AI predict the outcome for the problem?
Sorry, what's the question again?
How far in advance can it predict? Because normally with vocational type education, you would test the students very frequently. At least weekly.
Yeah. So the kind of measurements threshold that we looked at was like at least 6 months.
6 months.
6 months. If they started the training for 6 months, we have got some cards that indicates that whether he's continuing with his cards on a weekly basis.
Right.
So
do you really need AI if you're testing the students frequently? What value does the AI add over simply looking at the results of those tests?
This is not only looking at the test results. So this is particularly looking at, so you have your academic, so with trade sector, there are two types of performance. One is your academic performance. The other one is your workplace evidence, right? So of course, combining both those two, it gives you better indication. If you're doing really well with your test, and we look at that as well, some of those information partially, we would like to factor in a lot of academic information in future, but we have small amount of academic information. If you're really doing well, you will also have, that's like proportional. If you're really doing well with your academic results, you will be doing really well in your work activities as well. So you will see that the number of cards that you submitted, they are really proportional to their results as well. So generally that's the case. So now the question is, how will you know that this student, the ones that are not performing well, are the students that require further attention? So the ones that are doing well, the system is already, we know that they're doing well. The ones that are not doing well, that's where we are looking for pattern. And those patterns are, if a student has not submitted their cards for like a consecutive of 10 weeks, as an example, or 8 weeks, so those cards, weekly cards, will reflect their effort, right? We look at those cards. If a student has been enrolled for more than 2 years, but their progress is looking like worth of 1.5 years, then it's indicating they're a bit behind in their progress. So we use that information as well. And these feedback all came from the RTOs, is that if someone is enrolled in the training for 4 years, so the training goes on for 4 years for electrical as an example, and they have gone through their training for 3 years, but it's indicating they're sitting on a benchmark for like their overall rating looks like they're in yet, like their grades are looking at yet to equivalent of the result. The cumulative result is looking like they have completed 2 year worth of their study. Then there is something that we need to do about that student. So we have a range of benchmark that we use, which is a bit different from the traditional university grades. So if you're doing a subject, you do it for 4 months and you could get a grade like pass, credit.
No, we test the students every week.
Yes.
If they have a low score or no score for 3 weeks, I report them as a student at risk.
That's their formative assessment.
In 3 weeks.
Yeah, okay. So that's even, that can be, so we can use the same model for the universities as well. Which is great.
Yeah, so just building on, that sounds more like, so if you have rules around like, if someone doesn't submit a time card for 5 weeks, then they should be contacted. That sounds more like just if then, instead, like, I also can't see the need for the AI here, but maybe I'm missing something.
Oh, of course, that's the picture. So here we are only dealing with 13 data points, right? And we are only looking at their workplace evidence, right? Mm-hmm. But the problem that I talked about is far bigger. I haven't even captured the behavioral insights. So our goal as Exemplar is to start. So what you are seeing is just a part of, and that's why I say cool. We are going to pave the foundation for a bigger problem, a bigger solution. So this is just a part of what we are trying to solve and address. So we are, because we started with this because Exemplar has wealth of information about their cards. We also have a lot of information about their academic progress. That will, so as part of this model, so this first iteration, we focused on the workplace evidence. In future, we have the goal of expanding it to include academic progress. And then the next one is very personally relevant for myself, because the issues that I mentioned is that 71% of students have well-being issues, right? You have physical, mental well-being issues. A lot of students apprentices have relationship issues with their employer. So those are the things, evidences that are absent.
So will you be analysing information about the employer?
We have whole lot of information about our employer, but those behavioral kind of information, we have a product roadmap where we aim to actually expand our product so that we can get more information about our students and our teachers.
So often a student might be academically progressing well, but then we find that on the job, their employer may just give them the same work to do consistently over 2-3 years. And so they might drop out for the lack of variation in their work, and also they're not progressing on the work evidence side of things. So this is a way of identifying early on that the type of work they're doing might lead to them dropping out earlier.
I mean, fundamentally, it's the underlying mechanism can scale to thousands, if not millions of data points or characteristics, or what we like to call factors, right? So factors or characteristics of the employer, the type of work, what's happening in the economy, is there competition, what is the student health, well-being, all these dimensions. The benefit would be to be able to identify the top ones that matter, that could form normal, if very simple if then else rules, which is great. But it's generally the blending area. Like the star performers are going to be fine. The ones who are really struggling, that's going to be obvious to spot. It's the middle range where they're at the cusp of one side or the other. And so I think some of this work would be very, very interesting.
So the 13 data points, so you mentioned about, and we looked into that as well. So like writing a logic for one data point, you probably end up with 10 lines of code. So looking at 13 data points gives the factor of multiplying them, to the power of something. So you'll end up with 1,000 lines of if and then else code, which you definitely don't want to do, and it does not give you the goal that you wanted to achieve. That's where the power of AI comes in, because you can train that model with a whole range of different data sets. And the goal here is to start, this is the baby step that we have taken. It is going through the QA process. The earlier feedback is really good, but it is the challenges that I have mentioned earlier is about those well-being issues. And it is very relevant for myself, because when I came here 20 years ago, I have gone through same kind of student experience. So like it's like you go through the hardship, financial hardship, you go through the relationship hardship, you go through those uncertainties, and then if you had a really good environment of support, things might have turned differently. So many students, they are able to finish, but there are lots of students who are not able to finish. So it's the baby step that we have taken, and it's looking good. And as Avi mentioned, with the benefit with these kind of models is similar to ChatGPT. You can scale it. So we are dealing with 13 data points. We can deal with 100 million of different types of data points. Compute is not a problem as well, because we can just scale it up as we need. By the way, I should have finished this a week ago. That's what my boss says. But I think if I can finish this job in a lifetime, that would be good enough.
So I don't want to add to your burden, but when are you going to have the version of this for universities? Because we have interns who are similar to apprentices. They're getting paid to work in companies doing computer things. And we have, at ANU, we have about 50 of those each semester, and we have about 300 students doing group projects for clients in government agencies and other places. And it's a very similar issue. We get feedback from the clients on how the students are doing, and that influences the assessment.
I think our model it needs a bit more tuning, and I think it can be used in any, like in the kind of environment that you're talking about. We are already in discussion with Flinders University at the moment. They would like to run a kind of pilot with us. That's we are discussing. If that goes ahead, that gives us a bit more, and we get an opportunity to see the data coming from university as well. At the moment, we're dealing with data from VET. Because it's the kind of model where we can add new data points and see the result.
Maybe Tom can get you some data.
And we can be in touch.
Would you like some a dozen students to help write the code?
Why not? Of course, that's an opportunity.
This is the sort of thing they work on for their projects as well. And analyse the data.
Absolutely. We have, as I've mentioned with Exemplar, we have the second and third part where you said we could just write 3 lines of code. Because the AI, we are looking at a feature where we would like to get all the information about, like all the relevant information about the students that will allow us to make sure that they can finish their study. The scope is really big, and that's why our product, we are working to actually shape our product for that future, so that we can get much more information about our student activities, much more information about our employer, and create an environment where they can actually have better chance of completing the course. And also employers, it's a very big challenge for them because they can't find suitable apprentice as well, and that's a problem for them as well. So if we could actually give an improved kind of environment where they find the employment that is apprentice that is suitable for their need, that is helpful. So within Exemplar, we are expanding our services. Our team is growing. I think we have fantastic leadership. We have really good team of people, and having another 10 will make it even better, I think. So yes, we're in this for a long time, I think. Yes.
So I've got a few questions, but I want to invite others online if they have
Sure, I'll
questions
stop
as
here.
well.
I think I have blabbered a lot. Thank you, everyone.
If you've got some questions, don't hesitate. Put your hand up, or just come off mute and ask, or you can put it in chat and we'll ask. I've got 3 questions. One is around, 2 are very straightforward around the specifics of how you're using it. One is more general around what is the reporting overhead for students and the providers? Because if there's a burden to report and fill in details and you're going to find some obstacles to gathering sufficient data. So have you sort of looked at ways to
what kind of reporting are sorry?
So for example, pulling in information about, hey, I spent 25 minutes doing this, I did 15 minutes of doing this, I did 10 minutes of doing this. Have you considered that some people are just inherently, they feel it is a waste of time to put that information in?
This is a requirement, if I understand. In the training, it's a national training standard.
Particularly for electricians. Other trades, not as much, it's more of a recommendation. But for electricians in particular, it's a requirement.
Well, if you could get even automatically collect that information as they're doing the activity, that you're going to get all sorts of interesting dimensions of behavioral data that could be very interesting, right? So imagine having the ability to let an AI observe the conversation between the apprentice and the mentor, and then look for sentiments within that conversation, the tone, the topics that come up. Is it the same conversation multiple times? Is there a sense of sarcasm or a hint of boredom, right? That thing could be interesting as well to consider. So just something to that.
Thank you.
Why do you use neural networks to do this work? Because is there a particular reason you could have used some of the other ML techniques as well, right?
Yes, of course. That's a good question.
Numbers. He's got numbers.
Yes,
Neural
I think
networks are good with
exactly.
numbers.
I think in this case that would be the one primary driver for it.
Because the only concern I have is it's harder to interpret neural network, right? Because they're a bit of black box.
Black box, yes.
You could look at decision trees, you could look at logistic regressions as a way to get some rules that you would want to construct, right? You could also look at other GBT-like techniques, or that could just work as well. The advantage there would be the balance between comprehension versus accuracy. So neural networks and black box models are much more accurate. Your ability to interpret them might limit you. So you might want to consider running the same data through more interpretable models to see what you glean out of it. That's just a suggestion.
Yes, we haven't trialed it, but we have explored the non-neural net models because we wanted to, keep it really dynamic. So as I said, 13 data points, we wanted to be able to
scale to thousands at some point.
Yeah, so that was probably kind of motivation. We haven't trialed other ones, but with the kind of research and literary materials that we found, we thought it would be more effective because given that we are a small company, we wanted to focus on something that would give us big bang with little effort. So we looked at other literary sources and we thought neural net would be more suitable for the kind of work that we are doing. And as I told you, that we have the intention of expanding it in future. Okay. That would be the reason. But of course, we can go back and look at other methods.
By the way, just another one is using accuracy, which is great. What would be really worthwhile exploring is precision versus recall, because you essentially have a two-class problem.
Yeah.
So precision recall would give
the class can increase. That's the other thing. So we are saying yes and no, And the day I showed that to Ben said, "Can I add one more?" So he
was looking great for that.
Yeah, exactly. So he was looking for something in the middle, and I said, "Oh, yes, of course. I'll make sure that I use softmax so that I can go not a binary one. I'll go for something."
You're paving the way for future scalability.
Yes. So he tested me. I can tell you that.
Other questions for Anu?
I have a couple.
Sure.
You mentioned behavioural insights. I mean, do you know which interventions work for which risks?
I think generally, and Ben might be able to give better insight on that, but in our discussion was the intervention helps in this if there are well-being issues, as an example, or if the student has a relationship issue with the employer, you might get some indication through those interventions. You start a conversation, you say, "What's going on? You're not submitting your cards." And they might say, "My supervisor, I submitted, but my supervisor doesn't approve."
But you're not trying to model that. You're not trying to say, "We did this intervention and the risk, the engagement or whatever was improved." Like, you're not looking at that at this point, from the sounds of it.
That we will definitely, once we get these recommendations, the RTO admin will engage with the students to see how it tracks, and then we can get some feedback out of it to say whether it was true or not.
And then what flows from that is, it seems to me you're developing models largely for the institutions to use. The government's just announced a big policy reform around vet and higher education. How do you inform policy? This is very operational.
I type it into my blog.
I think we closely work with the government as well.
This is just totally off the cuff, but one of the things from someone who's not in that space at all is, people used to do apprenticeships in big government, public service organisations. Like, that was the sort of place where people got diversity of training, whereas now people do apprenticeships in, small private businesses that don't have the variety of work or maybe the skills to sort of train people, all those kinds of things. Like, they're big policy reform kind of settings. They're not things that little institutions can do much about.
Yeah, that's true as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. You can extract some insights and make it as a policy play. But I like your other suggestion around what interventions actually work and what doesn't work, because there's a lot of work in behavioral psychology where you are into, there's all sorts of interesting tidbits or stories where, just sending a handwritten letter got people to respond more to a request.
Absolutely.
Right. So it might be worth looking at how you could frame that set of interventions with the providers and then collect data on that. Then that could keep informing it.
It'd be a good time to sell it to the education department, because they have this huge report from the higher education committee, and they're trying to work out what to do. And
the problems in vet are kind of long-standing, and they sort of result from past reforms that basically created some of the problems.
And are you ready for the fact that a lot of the things you find they can't do anything about? So
obviously.
Andrew Norton at ANU just analysed, success in higher education, and the one factor is success at school, and there's nothing the university can do about success at school, because that depends on your parents and how wealthy they were.
Socioeconomic conditions and backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference.
So you'll probably find it depends on the employer to a large extent.
Understanding why might also be really helpful, because it's not necessarily always bad that people stop a qualification. For example, if it's not suited to them, or they consider it not suitable for their culture, or they find it dangerous, or there's lots of really good reasons, I guess.
In the industry, it is recommended for many people to not pursue with the training because it might not be the right fit for them.
So getting those insights as to why people stop, and then being able to inform the industry, how the industry can adapt. For example, women might feel like there's no female toilets, or there's nowhere to dispose of sanitary products on any work sites. So how are they supposed to go to work? But understanding these sorts of, they sound minor, but it's a quarter of a woman's life. It's actually not minor at all. And these sorts of things make a huge difference to individuals, and then being able to give that feedback to industry and support the industry in making adaptations to help everyone fit in could be really helpful for the industry.
I think you mentioned a very right word. I think, beyond the AI model that we are working on, our leadership team is trying to shape our product for so that we can become valuable to the industry as well. So that's the kind of future that we are looking at as well.
One of the things that I think could also be an input into this, and I think we found it anecdotally, is when there is, say, a class of students in say, electrotechnology, if there's one or two females in the class as a general rule does better. So that's something that I think can be really useful in terms of, one, academic progress, but then we can look at people withdrawing from or whatever. Yeah.
That would be, I think that's incorporating those specific insights from different trades would be quite useful to just link it with diversity literature, because there's like really solid diversity literature on like the more diverse your workforce is, the more robust and resilient your team is. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what project you're doing, that's just a thing. And so using this to understand how to incorporate people with more diversity is really a good way to prop up the industry and make the industry more sustainable and more innovative into the future.
You might also consider creating benchmarks for the organizations providing mentorships, right? So how are you comparing to other organizations that are providing the mentorship and experience? Because that's as much as it is up to the onus of the mentee, sometimes the mentors also need to be trained on how to be a good coach, how to help, how to navigate certain circumstances. So
they don't exactly welcome that sort of feedback.
Well, you're right, and this is where pride and insecurities and fear of being told that you're not good is undermining the potential. So how you do it comes down to how do you coach them, and one way is just to create a competition between the providers and say, hey, amongst the peers of providers that have similar characteristics, similar size, similar industry, similar areas, you sit at the 40th percentile of success rate. Wouldn't you like to improve that to get up to the top 90 percentile? And that creates an incentive motivation for people to recognize and reflect, hey, you're tapping into the competitive spirit, but you're tapping it and guiding it towards improving themselves. Right? Other questions or thoughts? This is great, by the way. I love the topic. I love what you guys are doing. This is really, really important because, here AI is being used to identify and help a problem that typically doesn't get a lot of attention from an analytics perspective, right? People are not looking at it from that perspective. What are the insights, how we could help students as well as educators? So this is great work.